Hey, what's up you guys? So today I wanted to discuss Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. So this is the first book in the Uglies series by, you guessed it, Scott Westerfeld. So this book is about a girl who grows up in a dystopian type society where at 16 you have an operation to turn you into a pretty. So everyone kind of looks very much the same in their little pretty society. Before that you are considered an ugly, and she is an ugly. And so she's about to turn 16, she's about to get her operation. This book kind of follows her learning about the illusion of that operation and how even though it turns you pretty, you do wind up losing a lot with that. And so she learns about that, and it's kind of her coming to terms with that and her coming to terms with her society. And so it's a really great book, and I did really enjoy it. I gave this book a 4 out of 5 stars. I think that it did some things really well, and some things I don't think it did necessarily as well as I would have liked. So it was definitely a really good book that I would definitely recommend reading if you haven't. It is a dystopian, so it does have that kind of dystopian feel to it, which is something that I have not had in a really long time. It's been a while for me since I've read a good dystopian, and so reading this, it kind of just reminded me of all of those things that I loved about dystopians back in the day. So let's start off with talking about some of the things that I liked. So I really liked the way that this book took a look at beauty and how making everyone the same kind of gets rid of individuality, and so there really isn't diversity anymore in this society because no one is really special. There's nothing that makes anyone different. And so I think that as a society, like, it's really important for us to highlight each other's differences and highlight the things that make us special, because that is what makes us a diverse community, is everyone being different. So I think that I really liked how this book took a look at that, and how on the outside it can kind of look very perfect because you don't have issues such as racial inequalities, but at the same time you no longer have individuals, so you don't have diversity anymore. You lose that. I just liked how this book took kind of a look at that and how we kind of dived into that. I also really loved the character of Shay in this book. I thought that she was such a great character. She was so fun to read about, and I loved how she developed throughout the book, and I loved how she introduced so many new things to Tally in this book. I just thought that she was such a fun character. I loved how she questioned authority. I loved how she was always questioning things, and I liked how she was just so fun. In general, I thought that the characters were all really great. Shay was just my favorite, but Tally also was really good. She developed so well in this book. I feel like her coming to terms with her society, it was very much a natural progression. It didn't feel like she was pushing anything too hard. It didn't feel like she changed unnecessarily. She changed because she needed to, because she was pushed to, because Shay helped her to see things that she wasn't seeing before. David helped her to see things that she wasn't seeing before. So that's what I really loved about the characters in this book, was they just felt so natural. I also loved all of the plot twists that kind of happened in this book because I just wasn't expecting them, and I always love that. And I love how they did not feel out of the blue. They felt like we were leading up to them, but I just was not prepared for them, and so I just loved it. This book was such a fun read. I also really liked how the Uglies' problems with the Rusties are like actual problems in our society. Like, we are killing the planet right now. Like, let's be real here. We don't have millions of years left on this planet as humans if we continue on as we are. So I loved that that was something that they actually looked at and was like, this was a problem that they had, and it is a problem that we have. And racism was a problem that they had. Racism, a problem that we have. Like, I loved that it brought these things up as being problems when they are really actual problems, and these are things that we need solutions to. So I loved that because it just made this world feel more real, because it felt rooted in our society today. And I don't know how long ago this was written, but I just love how these problems, they are so problems. I also really loved how everything was named in this book. I don't remember if I said this earlier, but it just reminded me so much of the good old dystopian days, because everything was named like a dystopian book just names things, because it's not like you have like Aralea or like something like that in a fantasy novel, or like Westeros. You have stuff like Special Circumstances. You have stuff that like makes sense, but it isn't what you think it would be. So I like that. So now let's talk about the things that I didn't like as much. So for me, the pacing was a little bit off in this book. So the beginning didn't go as fast as I would like it to, and the end happened faster than I would have liked it to. So I just wish that that had been balanced out a little bit better. That's probably what wound up having me take off that 1 star, actually, was really the pacing, because pacing is kind of something that I think is really important, and so in this book it just didn't do it for me. And so I think that was kind of my major issue. I also thought that because of that, the ending was a little bit on the lucky side. There wasn't a lot of planning that went into what happened at the end, and so I did not like that as much because it just doesn't make it feel like it could have actually happened. It kind of ruins the whole suspension of disbelief for me because, like, it's hard for me to believe that you can get that lucky, you know? I also wished that the setting overall was described to me a little bit better. I have ideas kind of in my mind for what things look like, but I honestly have no clue based off of the way that this was described, because all we really get is that the building that Tally lives in is a dorm, and New Pretty Town has a lot of parties, but we don't get much description beyond that. We don't get to see, like, what is this society actually looking like. I think the best part of the setting that was described was the camp, but even then, it just was not the best descriptions for me. I wish that I had gotten a little bit more as far as that is concerned. I feel like that was just underdeveloped, which is another reason to knock off that star, because you need a good developed setting for me to really latch onto the world and for me to really want to be invested in this world getting better and not just in the characters themselves. So that was just another problem for me. So overall, that's kind of my thoughts on this book. I'm going to launch into my spoilery section now. So if you have not read the book and don't want to be spoiled, I would leave now. But if you have read the book or don't mind being spoiled, you can stick around and hear some more thoughts. So I'm just going to discuss some of the scenes that I thought were the most impactful for me, that I liked the most. So the first thing that I really loved was Shay and David, and how Shay and David were kind of a little fling, but David did not really care that much, honestly. Like, she was okay, but she wasn't like life-altering for him, whereas he really found out that he wound up liking Tally a lot. And so I loved how that threw kind of a wrench in Shay's plan, and I loved how that made Shay really question Tally, and I loved how in the end Shay realized that Tally had betrayed them. And I just loved how overall that really shaped Shay as a character, because she really didn't do necessarily a whole lot in this book aside from introduce Tally to this new world, but Shay really did change how Tally felt about things, because Tally was worried about how what she was doing was affecting Shay. So I just loved that overall dynamic. I loved how that really played into the actual story of things. So that was just something that I thought was really fun. Also, really loved the opening scene with Paris. I loved getting introduced to a Pretty and kind of seeing how that operation kind of changed him. And so that kind of puts it in our mind of what is going to happen with the whole Pretty thing and how they wound up being brain damaged. I also loved that twist that was what was going on there, was that they weren't just being made pretty on the outside, they were being made pretty on the inside, and they were losing everything about them that really made them themselves, and they were becoming people who just went with the flow, did as they were told, and I loved that, and I loved how that is really what made their society work. So I thought that that was a super fun twist. And I love how David really cared for Tally, and I loved how he cared for Tally, but because of her and who she was, and how if she lost that, he wouldn't like her anymore. And so I also loved how he loved her for her imperfections, especially like her physical imperfections, because that's part of what makes us individuals and what makes us different, is our experiences within ourselves and our experiences with our bodies and our experiences with how we look. And I just thought that that was such a great part of this book, was that he recognized her for her, but also for how she looked, and how he loved how she looked, and he loved who she was on the inside, regardless of whether or not she would be technically termed pretty. I also loved the twist at the end when Shay was a Pretty, and I loved how she was as a Pretty. I loved how she lost so much of that fire that made her burn, and I just thought that that was such a great twist end, and I'm so excited to see how she's going to change and shape the next book, because she was so hurt, but she didn't care anymore once she had the operation, and so I'm just so excited to see how she's going to change, because she is gonna go through some shit, I bet. So I'm excited for that. I really love the whole portion of the book where Tally was traversing to the smoke, and I just loved how she figured out all of the little clues, and it just felt like such a fun little segment of the book where we were just traveling. And I liked how it wasn't too long that we were traveling for. It was like just enough time for me to kind of start believing that Tally is coming to terms with her situation. And so I loved that whole little bit. It felt like such a fun montage. It felt like it would have been honestly just like a fun scene in a movie. So I had a lot of fun there. I really, really loved how Tally and Shay bonded in the beginning of the book, and I loved the roller coaster scene. I thought that that was such a great scene, and I loved how that became like a little inside joke for Tally and Shay because, oh, the roller coaster. Like, that sounds like that would be so much fun, honestly. Like, I have not been on a good roller coaster in a while because, you know, the world sucks, but I just loved that scene. I really loved how so many things in the beginning of the book came into play in the end of the book, especially in regards to the bungee jacket and the hoverboards, because we learned about those things early on in the beginning of the book, and they were used so well in the beginning of the book in Tally's escape from New Pretty Town. And I just loved how they were used at the end of the book to kind of save the day as well. It just felt like such a fun thing to add in, especially with the bungee jackets, because it seemed so fun, honestly. Like, it seemed like such a fun way to end the book was that callback to the beginning of the book. And I always love that in books whenever you have kind of callbacks to the beginning of the book and you can kind of use that to see how the character has changed. And so I just loved that in this book. So that is my thoughts on Uglies by Scott Westerfeld. If you like this video, please like, subscribe, comment, all of those things. Comment your thoughts on Uglies. I'm about to start Pretties, so please don't spoil me for the rest of the series. I will see you in my next video. Bye!